Alright, welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host Kayuda, and I tell you what, it has been a full power, extreme potency time for me lately. And I could certainly list off all of the things that have been happening in the external, which I am going to do, but really this full power potency that I'm talking about, it's all this inwards. It's all about this inwards journey, which I want to talk about in this episode. But to elucidate what has been happening in the external, we recently finished up our 4-day, 3-night gathering over in the mountainous northern section of the Grampians for the next iteration of my gatherings, the pilgrimage, Shamanic Wilderness Expeditions, which really was beyond words. It was an overwhelming success with such a great mob of people. And I'll talk a little bit more about the pilgrimage later. But immediately after that, finished off the in-person component really of the Nature Connection teacher training program that I've been part of up in the east coast of Australia, New South Wales. And then immediately back down to Vic for a men's gathering called The Warrior's Way, where I was invited to offer a primitive friction fire workshop and to support a whole bunch of men. There was over 20 men there doing a bunch of deep work, good work. And then there was all the happenings of the home and getting prepped and geared up for another couple of trekking tours. And of course, calling in another group of epic people for the second round of the pilgrimage up in the Vic High Country. So yeah, there's a lot that's been happening in the external, but really that potency, the full power, it's all part of that inner landscape of the soul. Now, there are a lot of definitions of soul. So when I'm talking about soul, and perhaps we could reference it with spirit. And let's say that spirit is the creative life force energy that moves through all things, that animates all beings. And soul is the unique individual energetic blueprint within each and every one of us. Now, you might be familiar with Bill Plotkin. He is a depth psychologist, a wilderness guide, and an agent of cultural evolution or cultural regeneration. And he speaks to soul in a fantastic way. As opposed to many Western psychological models and concepts of soul, Plotkin proposes that soul is an ecological concept rather than a spiritual, psychological, or a religious one. So an ecological concept, what's that actually mean then? Well, it's suggested that Western psychology and religious ideology has clouded the idea of soul because of our long-standing severance from nature, from wild places and spaces, from the wilderness. Hence, these models and concepts are representative of this separation. So when Plotkin talks about the idea of soul being an ecological concept, he's saying that not only does the idea of soul allude to an intimacy with something deep, the deepest meaning within and within our lives, but that the nature of soul resides within the larger framework of the web of life and our unique place within this ecology. Perhaps another way of saying it is that the idea of soul could be languaged as our original blueprint, our original instructions of who we're meant to be, what we were born to do, and how this unique energetic blueprint, these original instructions, how they belong within the greater ecological niche of nature. The journey of the soul. This journey is not an ascent. It has little to do with the idea of 5D consciousness or the new age ideas of ascending this physical form and connecting to some kind of greater spiritual reality. So perhaps to help paint a picture here, if you envision a sphere and a vertical line through the sphere, so we're in the center of that sphere, and if you go upwards, then yes, that's representative of our connection to spirit, to oneness, to unity consciousness. But from that point in the middle of the sphere, if you track that vertical line downwards, that's the journey of the soul. It's a descent, not an ascent. Being a descent, that means going down into the darkness, into the soil, the leaf litter, the compost, earthworm dreaming, with the skulls and the bones, the underworld. And because of that, because of the nature of the journey, deepening into one's soul path is not necessarily going to be for everyone. Walking the soul path is not necessarily an easy thing to do, nor is it euphoric or blissful. It can be at times, yeah, absolutely. But the nature of the soul path is often to ravish us in wild ways, to strip us of the comfortable, and really to awaken us to these unique energetic blueprints with all of our gifts and medicines, and to offer us a pathway, a vehicle or vehicles, delivery systems to share and anchor our energetic soul signature here into the world. To carry on with what Plotkin speaks to, because I resonate with a lot of what he has to share and his reference point and his ideas. He speaks to soul itself not necessarily being capable of manifesting anything in this world. And rather, it is a mature and initiated ego coupled with the soul's guidance that is the driving force for manifesting these innovative delivery systems, really for the anchoring in and the embodiment of soul in culture. And I've seen him or heard him use this phrase of becoming visionary artisans of cultural renaissance or cultural regeneration. So when we're talking about the idea of soul, there is certainly a lot of potential here, a lot of potential to awaken and activate. And really, many people will never fully awaken to a greater potential in this lifetime. And I've been speaking about this a little bit lately, the idea of potential. Some people aren't even aware that they have potential, that there is a greater potential to be someone more or to do something more. And, as I say, when I'm talking about this idea of moreness, what I'm actually talking about is getting in touch with the deepest and truest essence of ourselves, what we're capable of and what we're here to do, which is tuning into and enacting, at least within this context, our deeper soul paths. So through a variety of means, we can awaken this potential that lives out in the future. We can reach forth and anchor that potential into the here and now. So the idea of potential, it doesn't necessarily have to be this future idealized version of self, of something. So we can have the vision of the potential. We can see it with clarity and we feel it so strongly that we anchor it in somatically. It becomes embodied. So we're drawing that future potential, that future timeline into the here and now and assimilating it into our body, mind, soul, spirit complex. And for whatever reasons, there will likely be people that never awaken to this potential or their greater soul path, or whatever kind of language we want to put to these terms, these ideas and concepts that we're talking about. Whether they're karmic cycles, soul contracts, fear-based aversions, it seems like some people are just not meant to pierce the veil of illusion and awaken to something greater. And that's also divinely okay. Perhaps we could see it. One way of seeing it is a reminder of what it might look like if one doesn't prioritize their own growth and personal evolution. And also it presents an opportunity too, for those of us with the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it, the heart to feel it, to cultivate more understanding, patience, acceptance, compassion, all those many virtues of the heart, while also looking out and observing and learning more about the human condition in this way, and this atmospheric fog of conditioning and stupor and amnesia that clouds the lens of awareness, consciousness within so many people. So if you're willing to walk the path of the soul, we can be sure that at some stage we're likely going to wake the bone pile. And I really love this phrase. This is something that mythologist and wilderness rite of passage guide, wilderness vigil guide, Dr. Martin Shaw, one of the great mythologists and storytellers of our time. It's something that he speaks to. And waking the bone pile, it's all about confronting all those unacknowledged deaths in your life. All those times that you threw someone else, or yourself for that matter, underneath the bus. And you can tell that Shaw says from experience within himself, but also through guiding many hundreds of people through initiatory experiences and passage rites, that when it comes to waking the bone pile, the more attention that you give it, the bigger that it tends to get. So we awaken more of that darkness. We awaken to more of the darkness, more of the underworld. And to be sure, Carl Jung sums it up well here in this quote, which I've also been sharing a bit lately. A tree's branches can only grow to heaven so far as its roots reach down to hell. A tree's branches can only grow to heaven so far as its roots reach down to hell. Try saying that 5 times really fast. So through waking the bone pile, we might start to gain, or we might gain more of an understanding that the bone pile, it really is, let's call it a repository of potential, of creativity, of healing. It's an opening into more depth and richness and meaning in our lives, rather than it just being, a dumping ground for our past, or all the forgotten and lost and neglected aspects of ourselves and society and all the discarded parts that so many of us reject, forget, lose, suppress, all the rest of it. So this soul journey, this descent into soul, the initiation into the descent of the soul, this can be a journey that takes a long time, like a multi-year long journey. And really, within a particular model that Plotkin proposes, which I believe is the eco-soul-centric wheel of development. So the soul initiation, it can take a person from the end of psychological adolescence, and there's a difference here between adolescence in how we might stereotypically define it in terms of reaching a certain age versus an actual psychological reference point or marker point. So it can take a person from the end of that through a liminal initiation stage that can last these many years and can culminate in a major life passage that Plotkin calls the soul initiation, which really marks the beginning of true adulthood. So he's suggesting that to reach true adulthood, psycho-spiritually mature initiated adulthood, it is a necessity to go through this initiation of the descent into the soul. And this psychological adolescence, we might think that we still may draw some kind of link there between the psychology and the age. But this psychological adolescence, this can be present in someone all the way up through the ages of 30, 40, 50, 60. So someone's age doesn't necessarily give full determination to where they are in their psychological path or psychological evolution. So, in saying all of that, there's just initiations upon initiations upon initiations are present. There's a potential there. And when we're talking about cultural renaissance and cultural regeneration, healthy cultures are shaped by the work of these true adults, soul-initiated adults, and with very few initiated adults in our current socio-cultural reality who ultimately give rise to, they ultimately give rise to elders. And, it's hard for me to have any kind of claim of authority when it comes to the roles of elderhood. But to offer some kind of context or marker point that we're moving towards, let's just say that without these initiated adults who give rise to the elders, who are ultimately tending the relationships between all of humanity and all of life, you might say that it's next to impossible to settle into this greater tapestry of a mature and a healthy culture. The soul path, it's all about being claimed by something much bigger than our egoic ideas and sense of self. It's about allowing spirit to move through us, animate us in unique ways that only we can enact. So it begs a question. Can we give up our preconceived notions and ideas of how we think life is meant to play out for us, how we think life is meant to look like, and surrender to a greater vision, a greater calling, the song of the earth, the song of Creator, and our belonging, our place within all of that, our place within the ecology? Can we surrender to this song that calls us, that beckons us forth? I don't know about you, but it's what I'm here for, and it's what I've been here for a long time now. And really, what an interesting thing it is to reflect upon our own journeys and paths and offerings, and to see things becoming more infused with soul and spirit and depth and meaning, richness, prayer, all those good things. And what's been present for me at the moment, of course, is the continued expansion of the work that wants to come through me, the pilgrimage, Shamanic Wilderness Expeditions, and what's really being asked of me, and how this unique medicine wants to move and be birthed, channeled through me. And I've landed on this phrase lately, and it's so much more than this, but this feels like some sort of reasonable distillation of what the pilgrimage is a portal into, which is exploring the mystery, awakening more of our potential, reclaiming more of our power, and activating our soul paths and unique individual medicines. So it is this convergence of nature awareness skills, shamanic practice and philosophy, spirituality, mysticism, ceremony, initiation, wilderness immersion, mountain trekking. And the pilgrimage is designed as a 4-day, 3-night journey. The next one's going to be in May 23rd to the 26th in the Vic High Country. So if you're listening before that and what I'm about to share piques your interest, and even if you're curious at some later date, you can read more about the pilgrimage if you head to the website link, kayutakiora.com/pilgrimage. I'll put that link in the show notes too. And this last pilgrimage, the first pilgrimage, it was just magic. And I sincerely wish to share this kind of work with more people, more seekers, more people on their soul paths. Those that are wanting to actualize and anchor in more depth, meaning, richness, connection, belonging, personal power, wild awareness, awe, wonder, connection to the divine, sacred song, deepening into the mystery, all of this good stuff. And one of the moments that is still super alive for me, super alive in me from the last pilgrimage, is we were rounding the bend during this walk at the base of the mountains, and I prompted everyone to come and take pause on this spacious, semi-rounded, craggy sandstone outcrop with 360-degree views, with this cresting wave, mountainous amphitheater right in front of us, the song of the mountain, the spirit of the mountain alive and well. And the wind and the swallows darting and the kestrels hovering, and the faces and the colours in the stone. Ancient beings anchoring in this old energy, this old wisdom. While our entire group was sitting or basking on that rocky outcrop, like lizards in the warmth of the sun, humbled in awe, in wonderment of this ancient and sacred landscape. We had a little mini ceremony within our larger ceremony, offering a prayer to the mountain gods. And there's something to be said here. The more that we make our offerings to the mountains, the more that they awaken from their slumber. This is a message that has been passed on to me from the mountains themselves and from the guardians of various mountains, both here in Australia and overseas, primarily in South America, a couple in Central America. Yeah, the more that we feed the mountains with our offerings, the more that they awaken. So much of the time, we, people, go to these wilderness locations and hike through them rather than saunter through them and pay our respects with offerings, with song. And, the mountain gods, the mountain spirits, they're right there. They're waiting for us to make that depth of reconnection, to call them in, to sing them back into our lives, and hence awakening them more and ourselves, all within this lived reality of animistic awareness, animistic consciousness. We're awakening them, we're awakening ourselves in the process. And I mentioned hiking and sauntering, and I love this piece of prose by the eco-poet John Muir. And usually I keep this one in my back pocket and only share it when we're out on the trail, but since I'm riffing on it now, I feel like it's appropriate to share. So John Muir has this to say about hiking. So he says, "Hiking. I don't like either the word or the thing. People ought to saunter through the mountains, not hike. Do you know the origin of that word, saunter? It's a beautiful word. Way back in the Middle Ages, people used to go on pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And when the people in the villages through which they passed asked where they were going, they would reply, a la Santa Tierra, to the Holy Lands. And so they became known as Santa Tierras, or saunterers. Now, these mountains are our holy lands, and we ought to saunter through them reverently, not just hike through them." So there you have it. Hiking, sauntering, trekking, take your pick, but it's a beautiful sentiment there from John Muir. So sauntering through the mountains, courting these wild places within and without. It's really palpable for me, and I absolutely know it's so needed in this world and within this current, let's say, socio-cultural, spiritual reality that I dare say anyone and everyone who's tuning into this Solocast episode, we're all part of it in one way or another. And the activations, the momentum of what's been stirring within me in terms of potential and soul and this program, these offerings, the momentum is palpable. So I'm going to be riding this wave into the darkness of winter for another expedition of the pilgrimage. And as we creep into winter, to be sure, we will be at the mercy of the elements, but we always are when we step beyond the confines of safety and security of home, of the homestead, and when we head out into the raw embrace of wilderness locations. And I've said it before, I reckon it's here in these wilderness locations that for many people, myself included, spirit often speaks the loudest. We've traded the wild for the safe, the secure, the convenience, the sterilized for a long time now. And we're seeing the consequences of that in many ways. There's a loss of resilience, a disconnect from nature, a spiritual stagnation, psycho-emotional deprivation. There's a loss of nature-based and earth-honoring wisdom traditions and reconnection, regeneration, heritage. So there's an importance here of spending time in semi-remote, remote wilderness locations. And when it comes to winter mountain walks, I'll have to admit I'm particularly fond of getting all rugged up and taking a saunter through the mountains during the cold. And it can can be frosty on the face and the fingers, and it can be much harder to get out of bed for sure. But I know that when I do, there's so much magic during that time of the year. The veil feels thinner. Hardly anyone's around. Mornings are particularly quiet and still. Mist rising from and through the forest has a particular enchanted magic quality to it. All the little dewdrops on the ferns and the foliage are like little portals, the Indra's web. There's portals into portals. And the towering gums, big ancestral sentinels, the hanging lichen, the moss-covered rocks. So whether big or small, there's so many subtle and powerful spirits guiding the way up the mountain during the cool of winter, evoking awe and wonder, deepening into the mystery. And in saying all of that, my suggestion is, if you've never walked up a mountain in the early rising mist, it's a must-do, at least once. So I'm certainly raising my pipe to the mountains, to Creator, to Great Spirit, that this next pilgrimage will provide all of this and much more, helping all of us in attendance continue to align to heart-centered, soul-oriented consciousness within this budding paradigm of what I've been calling New Earth leadership and the reclamation of our power, purpose, direction, soul, spirit, gift, meaning, medicines. So there are a few days left for early bird spots for this next pilgrimage. They're available until 17th of April. As I mentioned, if you want more details on this Vic High Country edition, or rather the pilgrimage in general, you can go to kayutakiora.com/pilgrimage or get in touch with me personally on social media at kayutakiora or through email via the website. Just introduce yourself and I will get you more info. And I'm also looking at bringing the pilgrimage up the east coast of Oz during winter. I would really love to make this happen sometime late July, if possible in a few different regards, logistics-wise, weather. So I'm keeping an eye out for appropriate places, venues, locations, options. So yeah, we'll see. If you've got any insights here into wild, evocative, mountainous wilderness locations that could hold us for 4 days of camping, sauntering, tuning into the song of the wild, the song of the mountains with all these shamanic practices, let me know. I'm all ears. So I'll leave it at that for this episode. As mentioned, come and connect on socials. I post often on Instagram and TikTok. I'm actively putting myself and this work out there, building an audience, or at least trying to. You can drop into the mailing list through the website. You're obviously watching or listening to this somewhere. There's YouTube, Spotify, all the podcasting apps. I haven't asked anyone to leave a review for a while now. That's obviously, I suppose that's still a thing. People are still doing that. But really, look, if you vibe this, it'd be hugely appreciated if you share it with someone. Whether this podcast episode directly or my social media posts or, uploading a screenshot to your stories or something like that. Just helping spread the message, helping me continue to actualize my soul path and gifts and medicines that are asking to come through these vehicles, through these delivery systems, to keep up with this inspired change, to manifest in a better world for our friends, our family, our children, future generations, and also all of us in the here and now. I'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was as fruitful as birdsong or morning wind. Until next time.